I sometimes wonder if people throughout history have always felt that theirs was a time of overwhelming violence. Maybe these times are not so unique. But from the perspective of just my lifetime, I feel that our present time will be remembered for the frequency of the gunshots, the tearing of the fabric of things day by day, headline by headline, until the unthinkable becomes commonplace, and the devastation of senseless violence becomes an expectation rather than an exception to our sense of security. Maybe it is similar to the era when a generation dutifully ducked and covered under their desk in fear of the bomb. The children, then and now, are trained. Then we covered because the bomb would crumble buildings and door frames and basements were said to be strong. Now it's different. The youth are taught to run in a zigzag pattern, if possible, because it's harder for a shooter to take out as many at one time if they scatter and scream and swerve. The children of the bomb were well trained, and now so are the children of the gun. They know what to do. It is a hard-fought knowledge, a terrible knowledge that we wish with heart and soul never had to be imparted. It's a wisdom born of suffering and a fear that is increasingly not uncalled for. No more, we cry, no more. Our hearts break over and over again, and we cry, no more. But still, it happens. Not long after the 9/11 attacks, I remember several sermons I heard or read or even tried to write that preached against fear and warned of the way that it cripples us, the way it holds us down. The horrible fact that in the wake of September 11th, 2001, our fear was twisted into a willingness to go to war as we found ourselves in the grip of what some called an epidemic of fear. In fact, in 2003, there was an article written by that exact title in the Boston Globe magazine, which said that since September 11th, quote, our appetites have been sharpened to a fine edge by a reflexive anticipatory dread of inexplicable cataclysm. Today, we worry our memories like beads on an endless rosary, on which Saddam's statue is linked with Lacey Peterson's body and the sudden emergence of a dangerous new bird flu virus from the Chinese outback. All of them linked to earlier sorrowful mysteries that included AIDS, Nicole Simpson, and the World Trade Center towers. Prayers rising out of a universe of ground zeros, where the serious can't even get heard unless it shouts itself into the catastrophic. Unquote. Although the dreaded events mentioned in this article may seem like distant history to us now, the image spoke to me. We worry our memories like beads on an endless rosary. Worry beads of one fear clicking over another again and again. And the message I remember most from what I heard and read was some version of that old dictum, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That if we could only stop focusing on the isolated, the sensationalistic and the extremism, we could rest in the great probability that with work and commitment, everything could still be okay. In the last months, that message does not resonate with me quite as much. Maybe the probabilities really haven't changed. It could be argued that in the overall perspective of human history, the chances that everything's still going to be all right are very high. But today, it's not only fear itself that seems twisted into an excuse for wars and violence. Today, I wonder if the thing we have to fear is not only fear itself, but also our own exhaustion. Our own exhausted inability to directly confront the sources of the heartbreaks that tear us apart over and over again. This is what I feel, and I hear it from my friends. We are just so tired. This seems to be becoming our reality, where the serious can't even be heard unless it shouts itself into the catastrophic. And in the midst of all that, and our own exhaustion, we still have to find a way to make meaning. We must look again for how we will find our way through the fears of our time. And in my searching for that way, I came across this story. It's a true story. It gave me pause. It gave me hope. Many of you may have heard the story of Antoinette Tuff, a woman who carved a victory out of almost certain disaster. Her story slid by quickly in the national news cycle in the fall of 2013. At the time, I guess I just wasn't listening. Antoinette Tuff was the bookkeeper at the Ronald E. McNair Learning Academy in Decatur, Georgia, where 800 children were gathered in their classrooms going about their business when a 20-year-old man named Michael Hill walked into the school office with an assault rifle. Holding Tuff and another office employee hostage, the gunman told her that he was sorry for what he was about to do, but he was ready to die. He was armed with multiple weapons and enough ammunition to devastate the school, and he seethed with anger. Tuff looked up at him from her place of utmost vulnerability, and she started to talk. At the point of a gun, she told this young man about her life, about her marriage that fell apart after 33 years, and when that happened, she didn't know that life was worth living, about her failures in business and in life, and her struggles to find a way through. She told him that these seemingly impossible situations don't have to claim us entirely, that it was going to be okay, that if she could recover, then he could too. And she did what seems so obvious, but what hostages seldom do. She asked him to put down the weapons, put the bullets on the floor, and she would stay with him through all of it. And then, and here's the amazing part, Antoinette Tuff told this man who held her at gunpoint that she loved him. She told him she loved him. And no one died at the school that day. After this incident, people kept asking, how is it possible that Antoinette Tuff was not overcome by her fear? Why wasn't she afraid? What kept her fear at bay? But of course, that's the wrong question. The 911 call that she made while the shooter was still in the building, a call he actually asked her to make, while the children from the school were streaming out the back door to the safety of buses. That 911 call shows otherwise. "Let me tell you something, babe," Tuff told the dispatcher. "I've never been so scared in all the days of my life. Oh, Jesus." It's not that she wasn't afraid. She was, in fact, mortally afraid. She was existing in both the laser-like focus of fear at gunpoint and our more general national fear stemming from Columbine and Virginia Tech and Sandy Hook. All of it centered precisely on her. How could she not be afraid? She was terrified, and she didn't bother denying it. Yet out of that fear came astonishing courage, and perhaps even more radical than that, heartrending compassion. Courage is one thing, but compassion, that is heroism on a whole nother level. And that is why Antoinette Tuff's story deserves to be retold. In the presence of great fear, she was not for one moment blinded to her own deep compassion. And that alone could save us all. Stephen King, the author, has written that fear has the power to render us, if only for moments, virtually insensible, so attuned to the beating of our hearts and the continued flow of our own blood, that we are incapable of much more than hope for our continued existence. Fear, he says, is the emotion that makes us blind, because underneath it all, our fears are really one fear, the great fear of our mortality. And in the face of our fear of mortality, we are stopped still, blinded to the more sublime things. Most of the time, I suspect Stephen King is quite right. And yet, there are moments in the midst of such overwhelming dread when we are anything but blind. Times when we are even more awake and aware than perhaps we could ever be otherwise. When fear has a way of illuminating what is really necessary. And there are also times when the only remaining necessary thing is a sense of compassion. A compassion that can arise right in the middle of our moments of greatest fear. Many years ago, I heard a sermon where a minister asked if there was one single doctrine, any single doctrine, or any idea or concept that was so achingly important that you would hold on to it no matter what. Even if the evidence indicated otherwise, even if all the facts pointed to the opposite and everyone around you disagreed, was there one thing, one single great surmise that you would hold on to even unto the gates of hell, even if you don't believe in hell? Basically, he was asking if there was one idea that was so compelling to you that you must choose to believe as if it were true. Choose to live as if it were true no matter what. The preacher Carl Scoville once said that for him, that great surmise was simply this: that at the heart of all creation lies a good intent, a purposeful goodness from which we come, by which we live our fullest, and to which we shall return at last. And that this deep well of purposeful goodness is the supreme reality of our lives. For him, that was the choice: to live as if it were true, even if it weren't. because to live otherwise would break his soul. He made his choice, and he chose to live as if we are loved beyond measure. I find that surmise, not the specifics of it, but the choice, very compelling. And lately I've pondered what I hold as a necessary truth. And I think Antoinette Tuff personifies my particular great surmise, that which I choose to assert in spite of contrary evidence. I choose not to live as if we are loved beyond measure, but to live as if we ourselves are capable of loving beyond measure, no matter what. Can I prove this is true? That fear might illuminate not only the desire to survive, but also the capacity to love even in the direst of circumstances? Can I prove that love does not have to blind us to compassion? No. Most of the evidence probably points to the contrary. But I choose to live as if this is possible. Because if I don't, then fear leads only to fear, and pain leads only to pain, and there is never a day in the office of a school in Georgia where nobody dies. Because one woman had unquenchable compassion enough to tell the man on the other end of the gun that she loved him. Now, I've asked myself, did Antoinette Tuff really mean it when she said that? Did she really experience compassion for this tragic young man, or was she merely a brilliant negotiator who was wise enough to know that this boy just needed to hear something a little warm and fuzzy to keep him from pulling the trigger? Maybe she didn't really love him or feel compassion for him, but instead was only mouthing desperate platitudes in a desperate situation. Okay, fair enough. But in these fearful days, I shall make my great surmise. I shall choose to live as if she really did see the pain behind his angry eyes. I shall choose to live as if she did, in that moment, feel love for the man who threatened her and the 800 children whose lives she protected. I have also asked myself, how would I have reacted in her place? And I'm afraid that my reaction would have been dominated by my fear and pain, not my heart and my better self. But that tells me that I need to practice that compassionate consciousness in all the moments of my life. All is not lost. Fear does not have to blind us. Instead, maybe it can hone us to a fine point of laser-like love and compassion. From the story of Antoinette Tuff and from the support of this Unitarian Universalist congregation, I have adopted my own great surmise. Not that we are loved beyond all measure, but that we are capable of compassion beyond all measure, and that love can emerge even in the most tragic of circumstances. May it please be so. And I'd like to end this part of the service with a responsive reading. It's called The Legacy of Caring. It's in your hymnal, but I think it's also on one of the slides. Our faith, that's not it. It's number 666 in your hymnal. There aren't a lot of hymnals scattered around, but if you can find one, number 666 in the back. It's called A Legacy of Caring. And in our caring, we can share hymnals. Despair is my private pain, born from what I have failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome. Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you. I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestries of brokerage firms, drug dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag baby's cart, rage and pain in the faces that turn from me, afraid of their own inner worlds. World as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world courses through my veins. From within this world, my despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy of caring. Thank you.